there comes a moment in life when the noise stops. No more texts, no more checking your phone, no more overanalyzing every word, every pause, every mixed signal, just silence. And most people fear that silence. They think it means loss.
They think it means the end.
But what if I told you that silence is where everything begins? When two people go no contact, especially when one or both carry avoidant tendencies, something extraordinary is set into motion. Not on the surface, not in the visible world, but deep beneath it in the emotional, psychological, and even spiritual layers of who you are. Because here's the truth. Confusion cannot survive in clarity. And no contact, that is pure, unfiltered clarity. When you remove yourself from the constant cycle of chasing, pulling, distancing, and overthinking, you strip the relationship down to its core essence. No more distractions, no more emotional noise. And suddenly both of you are left with one thing, yourself. And that is where the real work begins. You see, an avoidant runs from intensity. They run from vulnerability. But when there's no one left to run from, where do they go? They go inward. And for many, that's the scariest place to be. Because now they have to face the very emotions they spent a lifetime avoiding. And you're no longer caught in the cycle of trying to prove your worth. You're no longer shrinking yourself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. You're standing alone, and that's where your power is reborn. This is the paradox. When both of you stop reaching, you both start awakening. Because energy doesn't disappear, it transforms. All the energy you once poured into them wondering, worrying, waiting, you now have access to again. And the question becomes, what will you do with it? Will you use it to stalk their social media, replay memories, and stay stuck in the past? Or will you rise? Because growth is not something that happens while you're clinging. Growth happens when you let go. And in that space of letting go, something incredible begins to unfold. You start seeing things you couldn't see before. You start realizing your patterns, your attachments, your fears, your boundaries or lack of them. You begin to understand that love was never meant to feel like anxiety. That connection was never meant to feel like confusion. And that your value was never meant to be negotiated. And as you grow, something else happens. You detach. Not in a cold, disconnected way, but in a grounded, powerful way. You stop needing. You stop chasing. You stop trying to control outcomes. And instead, you become centered in who you are. And here's where the impossible begins. Because when two people who once triggered each other begin to heal separately, the entire dynamic shifts. Maybe they come back together, but this time it's different. There's awareness, there's emotional responsibility, there's space without fear. Or maybe they don't come back at all. And that's the part most people don't want to hear, but it's the truth you need to understand. The real miracle is not getting them back. The real miracle is becoming someone who no longer needs what once broke them. Because when you reach that level of growth, you don't attract the same chaos anymore. You don't settle for inconsistency. You don't confuse attention with love. You become aligned. And life responds to alignment. So whether that person returns or not becomes irrelevant, because you've already won. You've broken the cycle. You've transformed your pain into power. You've taken silence and turned it into strength. And that is what most people will never do. They'll keep chasing, keep reacting, keep repeating the same patterns over and over again, wondering why nothing changes. But you chose growth. You chose truth. You chose yourself. And when you do that, when you truly step into that level of self-respect and awareness, you don't just change your relationships, you change your entire life. So don't fear no contact. Don't resist the silence. Because in that silence, you are being rebuilt, stronger, wiser, unshakable. And when you rise from that place, nothing, no person, no pattern, no past will ever have the power to break you again. Most people don't realize how much of their emotional pain is not coming from reality, but from confusion. It's the constant questioning, the overanalyzing, the what did they mean, the why did they pull away, the do they care or not. That mental loop becomes exhausting. It drains your energy, your confidence, and your sense of self. And when you're dealing with an avoidant dynamic, that confusion gets amplified because the signals are mixed connection one moment, distance the next. You're left trying to decode behavior instead of experiencing genuine connection. But when no contact begins, something powerful happens. The confusion doesn't get louder, it starts to dissolve. At first, it feels uncomfortable, even painful. Your mind wants answers. Your emotions want closure. Your habits want to reach out. But when you hold that line, when you stay in the silence, you begin to notice something shifting inside you. Clarity starts to replace chaos. Because without constant interaction, there are no new mixed signals being fed into your system. You're no longer reacting in real time to their actions or inactions. Instead, you begin to observe. You begin to reflect. You begin to see the relationship not as you hoped it was, but as it actually was.
And that distinction changes everything.
You start remembering patterns instead of isolated moments. You begin to see consistency or inconsistency for what it truly was. You recognize how often you compromise your own needs just to maintain the connection. You see how much of your energy was spent trying to hold something together that required two people, not just one. That's clarity. And clarity is power. Because once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. Once you recognize a pattern, you can't pretend it doesn't exist. And once you understand the truth of a situation, you're no longer controlled by the illusion of it. This is why no contact is not punishment, it's perspective. It removes you from the emotional battlefield and places you in a position of awareness. You're no longer in survival mode, reacting to every shift in their behavior. You're in a space where you can actually think, feel, and process without interference. And as that clarity deepens, another layer unfolds. You start seeing yourself more clearly too. Not just what they did, but what you allowed. Not just how they behaved, but how you responded. You begin to understand your own patterns of attachment, your fears of abandonment, your tendency to overgive or overextend. And instead of blaming or shaming yourself, you start learning. That's growth. Because true clarity is not about pointing fingers, it's about taking ownership. And when you take ownership, you reclaim your power. You realize that you don't need to wait for someone else to change in order for your life to improve. You don't need their validation to feel worthy. You don't need their presence to feel complete. Clarity reminds you of who you were before the confusion took over. It brings you back to your center. And here's the deeper truth: clarity doesn't always give you the answer you want, but it will always give you the answer you need. Sometimes it shows you that the connection wasn't as deep as you believed. Sometimes it reveals that the effort was one-sided. Sometimes it makes you face the fact that what you were holding on to was potential, not reality.
And that can hurt. But that pain is clean.
It's honest. It's not the chaotic, draining pain of confusion. It's the kind of pain that leads somewhere, the kind that transforms you. Because once you have clarity, you can make decisions from strength instead of desperation. You can choose based on truth instead of hope. You can move forward without constantly looking back. And that is freedom. So when no contact begins, understand this: it's not empty space. It's sacred space. It's where illusions fall apart and truth stands tall. It's where you stop chasing answers outside of you and start discovering them within. And when you reach that place where your mind is no longer clouded, where your heart is no longer pulled in 100 directions, you become grounded. You become certain. You become aligned. And from that place of clarity, you don't just heal, you evolve. Silence has a way of stripping everything down to the truth. When there is no contact, no messages, no reassurance, no distractions, there is nowhere left to hide. And that is exactly why it becomes such a powerful force. Because when the external connection disappears, the internal world gets louder. Thoughts you avoided begin to surface. Emotions you suppressed start demanding attention. And the very things both of you tried to escape within the relationship now stand directly in front of you. For someone with avoidant tendencies, this can feel overwhelming. Their entire pattern has been built around distancing from emotional intensity, around creating space whenever things start to feel too real, too vulnerable, too deep. But when no contact is mutual, that usual escape route is gone. There is no one chasing them, no one pulling them back into interaction, no one softening the silence. It's just them and their own mind. And that's where something profound begins to happen. Because avoidance only works when there is something external to avoid. When that disappears, the emotions don't vanish, they turn inward. The questions they once ignored start to echo. Why did I pull away? Why did closeness feel uncomfortable? What am I actually afraid of? These are not easy questions. In fact, they can be deeply unsettling, but they are also necessary for growth. At the same time, you are going through your own confrontation. Without the connection, you're no longer distracted by trying to fix, understand, or hold on to someone else. You're faced with your own emotional patterns. Maybe it's the fear of abandonment.
Maybe it's the need for validation.
Maybe it's the habit of overgiving in hopes of being chosen. Whatever it is, no contact shines a light on it. And here's the truth: most people overlook this confrontation is not punishment. It's an invitation to finally see what has been driving your behavior beneath the surface. An invitation to understand your triggers instead of reacting to them. An invitation to break patterns that would otherwise repeat endlessly. Because if you don't face your inner world, you will keep recreating the same external experiences. Different person, same dynamic. Different situation, same emotional outcome. Silence interrupts that cycle. It forces awareness. And awareness is where transformation begins. At first, it might feel uncomfortable. You may find yourself replaying memories, questioning decisions, feeling waves of emotion you didn't expect. But if you stay present, if you resist the urge to numb it, distract yourself, or run back to what's familiar, you begin to notice something changing. You start understanding yourself on a deeper level. You recognize where your reactions came from. You see the connection between your past experiences and your current behaviors. You begin to separate what is truly about the other person and what has always been about you. And that realization is powerful because it gives you choice. When you understand your inner wounds, you're no longer controlled by them. You can respond differently. You can set boundaries. You can choose connections that align with your growth instead of your fears. And the same potential exists for the other person. Whether they consciously work through it or not, the silence creates a space where their usual defenses are challenged. Without constant interaction, without emotional triggers coming from you, they are left with the consequences of their own patterns. And sometimes, for the first time, they feel the weight of what they've been avoiding. This is why mutual no contact is so different from one-sided distance. It creates a mirror for both people. It removes the imbalance. It eliminates the chase and withdraw cycle and replaces it with stillness of stillness that demands reflection. And in that reflection, truth emerges. Not the story you told yourself, not the version you hoped for, but the raw, unfiltered truth of who you are, what you feel, and what needs to change. That's where the real shift happens. Because once you face your inner wounds, you can begin to heal them. And healing doesn't mean becoming perfect. It means becoming aware. It means recognizing your patterns and choosing not to let them define your future. It means building a relationship with yourself that is grounded, honest, and strong. So instead of fearing the silence, understand its purpose. It's not there to break you. It's there to reveal you, to show you the parts of yourself that need attention, compassion, and growth, to push you beyond your comfort zone into a space where real transformation can occur. And when you come out of that space, when you faced what needed to be faced, you don't just return to life as the same person. You return stronger,
More self-aware.
more in control of your emotional world. And from that place, everything changes. There is a powerful illusion that exists in emotionally inconsistent connections, and most people don't even realize they're living inside it. It's the illusion built on potential instead of reality. It's created in the moments of intensity, the deep conversations, the chemistry, the rare vulnerability, and then sustained by hope during the periods of distance and silence. You don't hold on to what is consistent, you hold on to what could be. And over time, that illusion becomes stronger than the truth. When no contact begins, that illusion starts to lose its grip, because illusion needs constant reinforcement. It feeds on interaction, on small breadcrumbs of attention, on occasional emotional highs that keep you invested. A message here, a moment there, it's just enough to keep the story alive in your mind. But when that supply is cut off completely, the illusion no longer has anything to stand on. And that's when reality begins to surface. At first, your mind might try to resist it. You'll remember the good moments, replay the best conversations, and convince yourself that what you felt must have meant something deeper. But as the silence continues, something shifts. Without new emotional input clouding your perception, you begin to see the full picture, not just the highlights, but the patterns. You start to ask different questions. Not did they care about me, but how did they show up consistently? Not what did we feel in those moments, but what did they do over time? And those questions lead you to something incredibly grounding, truth. Because value is not determined by intensity, it's revealed through consistency. Anyone can create a powerful moment. Anyone can say the right words when emotions are high. But real connection is built on presence, effort, and alignment over time. And when you step back during no contact, you finally have the space to measure that accurately. You begin to see whether their actions match their words. You recognize whether the connection was mutual or one-sided. You understand whether you were truly being chosen or simply being kept as an option. And this awareness can feel uncomfortable, even painful, because it challenges the story you've been telling yourself. But it also frees you. Because once the illusion fades, you're no longer attached to something that wasn't fully real to begin with. You stop romanticizing inconsistency. You stop justifying behavior that didn't meet your standards. You stop filling in the gaps with hope and start accepting what actually was. And in that acceptance, something powerful happens to reclaim your sense of value. Because illusion often causes you to lower your standards without realizing it. You become more patient than you should be, more understanding than necessary, more willing to tolerate uncertainty in the name of connection. But when the illusion dissolves, you see clearly what you deserve and what you were settling for. You recognize that your worth was never tied to how someone else treated you. It was only obscured by the story you believed about them. And here's the deeper shift. When you see the truth, your emotional attachment begins to change. Not because you force yourself to let go, but because the foundation of that attachment illusion no longer exists. You're no longer holding on to an idea. You're seeing a reality. And reality has a way of grounding you, stabilizing you, bringing you back into alignment. This doesn't mean you stop caring instantly. It doesn't mean the feelings disappear overnight, but it does mean you're no longer lost inside a fantasy. You're no longer waiting for something that may never come. You're no longer investing energy into something that isn't giving back in equal measure. You become aware, and awareness shifts everything. Because once you understand the difference between what felt good and what was actually good for you, your decisions start to change. You become more intentional with your time, your energy, and your emotions. You begin to prioritize connections that are stable, reciprocal, and real. And that's where your power lies, not in forcing something to work, but in recognizing what truly works for you. So when no contact removes the illusion, it's not taking something away from you, it's giving something back. It's giving you truth. It's giving you clarity. It's giving you the ability to see without distortion. And from that place, you don't just move on, you move forward with wisdom, with self-respect, with a deeper understanding of what love actually looks like, not as a fleeting high, but as a consistent, grounded, and mutual experience. And once you've seen that truth, you never go back to chasing illusions again. One of the most overlooked truths about emotional pain is this. It's not just about what you lost, it's about where your energy has been living. When you're deeply invested in someone, especially in an inconsistent or avoidant dynamic, your focus shifts outward. Your thoughts revolve around them. Your mood depends on them. Your decisions are influenced by them. Without even realizing it, you begin to pour your time, attention, and emotional energy into a space that you don't fully control. And over time, that creates imbalance. Because anything you invest in consistently will grow. If you invest your energy into uncertainty, anxiety grows. If you invest into chasing, exhaustion grows. If you invest into trying to decode someone else's behavior, confusion grows. Your inner world starts to reflect where your energy is being spent. Now, when no contact begins, something critical happens to get that energy back. Not all at once, not instantly. At first, it feels like withdrawal. Your mind still reaches for them. Your habits still pull you toward checking, thinking, remembering. But if you stay committed to the space, if you resist the urge to redirect that energy back into the same cycle, it starts to accumulate within you again. And this is where transformation becomes possible. Because growth doesn't happen when your energy is scattered. It happens when your energy is focused. When you're no longer pouring yourself into someone else's inconsistency, you finally have the capacity to pour into yourself. And that's not just a nice idea, it's a fundamental shift in how your life begins to operate. You start noticing things about yourself that you ignored. Your interests, your goals, your boundaries, your emotional needs. You begin to reconnect with parts of yourself that were put on hold while you were trying to maintain a connection that wasn't fully meeting you. And here's the key. This isn't about distraction, it's about redirection. There's a difference between avoiding your emotions and channeling them. Avoidance numbs you. Redirection strengthens you. So instead of using your energy to replay conversations or imagine different outcomes, you start using it to build something real. Maybe it's your physical health. Maybe it's your career. Maybe it's your mindset, your discipline, your sense of purpose. Whatever it is, the energy that once kept you stuck now becomes the fuel that moves you forward. And as you do this, your identity begins to shift. You're no longer the person waiting for a message. You're no longer defined by someone else's attention or lack of it. You become someone who is actively creating, growing, evolving. That's power. Because when your energy is aligned with your own growth, your confidence naturally rises. Not the fragile kind that depends on external validation, but a grounded confidence that comes from knowing you are investing in yourself consistently. You begin to trust yourself more. You begin to respect your own time and energy. And that changes the way you show up in every area of your life. Even your emotional state starts to stabilize. The highs and lows that once came from external triggers begin to level out. You're not constantly reacting anymore, you're responding with intention. You're grounded, centered, and clear. And from that place, your standards evolve. You no longer feel drawn to dynamics that drain you because you've experienced what it feels like to be energized by your own life. You've tasted independence not in a lonely way, but in an empowering way. You realize that your fulfillment doesn't have to come from someone else. It can come from how you live, how you grow, how you show up for yourself every single day. And here's where it becomes even more powerful when your energy shifts. Your entire reality begins to shift with it. The way people respond to you changes. The opportunities you notice change. The decisions you make change. Because you're no longer operating from lack, you're operating from abundance. You're not trying to fill a void anymore. You're expanding a foundation. And that is what attracts healthier connections, better opportunities, and a deeper sense of purpose. So when no contact gives you your energy back, don't waste it by sending it in the same direction it came from. Don't recycle it into old patterns. Use it, build with it, grow through it. Because the energy you once used to chase someone else's attention can become the exact force that transforms your life. And when you fully step into that, when you realize that everything you were seeking externally can be cultivated internally, you don't just heal, you elevate. Patterns don't break because you wish them away. They break when you interrupt them with something stronger than habit awareness, discipline, and the willingness to choose differently even when it feels uncomfortable. And in emotionally inconsistent connections, especially those involving avoidance, patterns can become deeply ingrained. One person distances, the other pursues. One withdraws, the other overcompensates. It becomes a cycle, predictable, exhausting, and hard to escape. The problem is most people try to change the pattern while still inside it. They communicate more, explain more, try harder, give more chances, hoping that this time something will shift. But when you're inside the cycle, your actions are often reactions. You're responding to triggers, not making grounded decisions.
And that's why the pattern continues.
Because it's being fed, even unintentionally. No contact changes that dynamic completely. It doesn't just pause the pattern, that disrupts it at its core. When both of you step away, the chase and withdraw cycle loses its momentum. There is no one pursuing, so there is no need to run. There is no one pulling back, so there is no trigger to chase. The entire structure collapses because the roles that sustained it are no longer being played. And in that collapse, something powerful is created: space. Space to think, space to feel, space to see clearly. But more importantly, space to choose differently, because patterns thrive on autopilot. They rely on unconscious reactions, emotional impulses, and familiar behaviors. When you create distance, you step out of autopilot and into awareness. You're no longer acting out of habit, you're observing it. You begin to recognize the moments where you used to react. You see the urges to reach out, to check in, to fix, to explain. And instead of acting on them immediately, you pause. That pause is where your power lives. Because in that moment, you have a choice. You can go back to what's familiar, even if it's unhealthy, or you can hold your ground and allow something new to emerge. And every time you choose differently, you weaken the old pattern. You prove to yourself that you are not controlled by your impulses. You show yourself that your behavior is not fixed, it's flexible. And that realization builds strength. At the same time, the dynamic of power begins to shift. In unhealthy patterns, power is often unbalanced. The one who needs less appears to have more control. The one who invests more often feels more vulnerable. And this imbalance creates tension, insecurity, and emotional instability. But when you detach, when you stop chasing, stop overgiving, stop trying to manage the connection, you reclaim your position.
Not by playing games, not by pretending not to care,
but by genuinely stepping into self-respect. Because real power doesn't come from controlling someone else's behavior. It comes from controlling your own. It comes from knowing what you will and will not accept. It comes from being willing to walk away from anything that doesn't align with your standards. And no contact reinforces that. It sends a clear message, not just to the other person, but to yourself, that you are no longer available for the same dynamic. That you value your peace more than temporary connection. That you are choosing stability over uncertainty. And that choice changes you. You begin to feel stronger, not because the situation is easy, but because you're no longer abandoning yourself within it. You're standing firm in your decisions. You're honoring your boundaries. You're breaking the habit of sacrificing your well-being for the sake of maintaining a connection. And that's where real transformation happens. Because once a pattern is broken, it cannot continue in the same way. If the connection ever re-enters your life, it will have to meet you at a different level. The old rules won't fit anymore. The same behaviors won't be tolerated. The same dynamics won't feel acceptable. And if it doesn't change, you won't either. You won't fall back into the same cycle because you've experienced what it feels like to be out of it. You've seen the difference between chaos and clarity, between reaction and intention. You've raised your standard. And here's the truth: raising your standard is one of the most powerful things you can do in life, because it doesn't just affect one relationship, it affects everything. The way you communicate, the way you connect, the way you choose who and what deserves your time and energy, it all shifts. You become more selective, more intentional, more aligned with what truly supports your growth. So when no contact breaks the pattern, it's not just ending a cycle, it's resetting your entire approach to relationships. It's teaching you that you don't have to repeat what hurt you. You don't have to stay stuck in what's familiar. You have the ability to choose something better. And when you fully step into that truth, you don't just change your behavior, you change your standards. And that changes your life. Most people think the impossible is about the other person coming back, suddenly transformed, ready to give you everything they couldn't before. They imagine a dramatic return, a realization, an apology, a perfect alignment where everything finally makes sense. And while that can happen in rare cases, focusing only on that outcome misses the deeper truth. The real impossible isn't about them changing. It's about you transforming in a way you never thought you could. Because when both of you go no contact and actually use that space to grow instead of react, something shifts at a level most people never reach. You step out of emotional survival mode and into conscious evolution. You stop being driven by triggers, fears, and habits, and you start being guided by awareness, intention, and self-respect.
That's not common.
Most people don't do that work. They sit in the silence, but instead of growing, they wait. They obsess. They hold on to hope without changing anything internally. And when the opportunity arises, they fall right back into the same patterns, wondering why nothing is different. But when you choose evolution over reaction, you break that cycle completely. You start noticing that your emotional responses are no longer automatic. The things that used to trigger anxiety don't have the same hold on you. The urge to chase, to fix, to prove yourself begins to fade. Not because you forced it to, but because you've outgrown it. And that's powerful. Because growth at this level is not surface level change, it's identity level transformation. You're not just acting differently. You're becoming someone different. Someone who doesn't need constant reassurance to feel secure. Someone who doesn't lose themselves trying to keep someone else. Someone who understands that real connection is built on mutual effort, not one-sided sacrifice. And as you evolve, something else happens. You start attracting differently. Not by trying to impress or control outcomes, but by simply being aligned with a higher standard. Your energy changes. Your presence changes. The way you communicate, the way you carry yourself, the way you respond to situations, that all reflects a deeper level of self-awareness. And people feel that. Life responds to that. Opportunities, connections, and experiences begin to match the level you're operating at. This is why the impossible is not about forcing a specific outcome. It's about becoming the kind of person for whom better outcomes are natural. Now, here's where it gets even more interesting. When both individuals in a no-contact situation choose growth, the dynamic between them doesn't just pause, it transforms. If they reconnect, it's no longer based on the same triggers and insecurities. There's space, there's understanding, there's a different level of emotional maturity. The connection either evolves into something healthier or it becomes clear that it no longer aligns at all. And here's the key, you're okay either way. That's the real shift. Because before, your emotional state may have depended on what happened next. Would they come back?
Would things work out?
Would you get the outcome you hoped for? Now, your stability comes from within. You're no longer waiting for a specific result to feel complete. You've already created that sense of completeness on your own. And that's what makes you powerful. Because when you don't need an outcome, you're free to choose what's actually right for you. You're no longer attached to potential, you're aligned with reality. You're no longer driven by fear, you're guided by clarity. And that's where life opens up in ways that once seemed impossible. You start making decisions from strength instead of desperation. You start walking away from things that don't meet your standards without second-guessing yourself. You start building a life that feels fulfilling, not because of who is in it, but because of who you have become.
And that changes everything.
So yes, sometimes the impossible looks like two people finding their way back to each other stronger and more aware. But more often, the real miracle is this. You become someone who no longer needs to chase, convince, or hold on to anything that isn't fully aligned. You become someone who chooses peace over chaos, growth over comfort, truth over illusion. And from that place, life doesn't just improve, it transforms. Because the moment you stop reacting to life and start evolving through it, you step into a level of power most people never experience. And once you reach that level, what once felt impossible becomes your new standard.